Greetings, everyone. In this video, I want to look at installing application software on Linux, a question I hear from a good many new Linux users. And let's be real, software installs on Linux are, for the most part, different than the ones experienced on other proprietary operating systems. And you know the ones I know. As with anything Linux, there tends to be a lot of jargon out there, and we need to cut through that on this subject. But as with anything also in Linux, there tends to be a lot of different ways to do things. But overall, installing applications on Linux nowadays can be dirt simple, or it can be as complex as you want to make it. So let's take a look at our options, okay? All right, back in the day before the internet, that is, I remember some challenges installing software on certain proprietary operating systems. After installing the operating system, one would go down to the local users group and search through their various archives to find applications. Once you found some, you would attempt to install them and you would hope that they were not buggy or infected. Anyone besides me remember the Michelangelo virus? Yeah, back in the days of floppy. Back in the mid-1990s, Linux distributions started introducing package management. This predated the Apple Store. It also predated the Google Play Store, the Microsoft Store. It predated all that stuff. Amazing how many of the best ideas come from the open source communities before being abused by corporations. But the various earliest package managers in Linux, like apt or RPM, were command line tools for the most part. While not too difficult to use, there was a learning curve involved. It was only later that graphical front ends became available. I seem to recall the earliest one was something called Synaptic for apt. Was a while ago. Package managers basically provide a central trusted repository for software along with handling any dependencies. And anyone who claims that proprietary operating systems did not have dependencies issues is smoking some bad stuff, man. I remember many times installing a program under Windows, being told I needed a different .NET framework, different C++ library, a different DirectX. I'm sure a lot of you have been through the grinder on Windows, but package management under Linux handles this sort of thing automatically for the most part. The next major evolution in Linux application installations was including all the dependencies in one package that would theoretically run on any Linux install. These were the snaps, the flat packs, the app images. For the most part, you had your application and all the really special dependencies wrapped up together, and it would run on top of a regular Linux system. One of the issues with these type of packages, they tended to be larger. You'd have many dependencies installed at different times. They ran in sandboxed environments. They sometimes had issues interacting with the system, but again, they would run on any Linux distribution. Now, don't get me wrong, one can still go old school on Linux quite easily and fight through all sorts of stuff like downloading source code and compiling it yourself. Linux has always had great package management, making it easy to install software. The problem being the large number of tools, methods, and, well, other things. I hope to bring a little clarity in this video to some of those differences, because there are some main tools. I mean, there are only, if you go back, way back, there are only several fundamental distributions of Linux. I think 5 or 6 that were back in the beginning. Everything's a fork of one of those for the most part. And so there's different package managers, but not that many. But we'll go over that. Incidentally, this is probably going to be the last video I do from Virginia. Will probably be the last video I do before probably mid-November, because getting ready to head out for the Philippines again. So that's coming up. Anyway, onward. Okay, before we actually jump into installing programs or applications, let's talk about dependency for a little bit. So as an example, back in my programming days, I'd write short programs, and we got an example here. It's all pretty straightforward until you get down to the printf line. This is actually a function call. Printf, %d is a format, and an x is a variable. And how you do this is a function that's included in something called standard IO or .h or standard in out, which if you look up at the top of the program, you'll find an include file. This include file is part of the C standard library. So the C standard library is a dependency of this program. Luckily, most Linux distributions have the C standard library already installed. It hasn't changed much in a while, but this is a dependency. So this program has a dependency, C standard library. Simple as that. Other programs have other dependencies on other libraries, on other programs. It's just something needs something else to run. Complicated, but it can lead to some confusion when you're installing stuff. And like I say, I remember installing stuff on Windows and having to load a different version of that framework because the existing version wasn't a dependency. You had needed a different version. Sometimes you have multiple versions of the same library, but yeah, those are dependencies. So generally what Linux does is it rolls up a program or an application into something called a package. The package has several parts. This is not meant to be a technical description. This is just a high-level look so you can understand about packaging. There's a section of the package that contains general information about the program, its name, its version, its author, things like that. There's also a section that lists the dependencies for that particular program. Again, libraries or other programs that it needs to run. And then finally, there's a section with the files to actually install. Generally in packages, these are binaries or scripts. They're not source code. That's something different. So the package is already, the application is already compiled and packaged up and is on the repository. So all major distributions have package repositories. And this is the trusted source where all the software packages reside. Note you can have multiple different repositories on each distribution, and we'll look at that in a little bit. But package repository or just repository is a collection of software. It's where it's all stored. You have your packages there, you have a database, so you can find out what packages are there. Your package managers allow you to search these repositories, pull packages, and install them. So that's packages, that's repositories. This is, for 90% of the case, this is how Linux works. I mean, you can compile stuff from source code, and then there's stuff that's not in the repositories. But by and large, this is what you're going to be doing on Linux. Okay, we've talked about dependencies, we've talked about packages, we've talked about repositories. Let's talk about package managers. And again, each major distribution tree has its own package manager. As I say, if you go back to the 90s, there were only a few distributions out there, but they've since forked into hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of distributions. But anyway, so Debian Terminal, this includes Ubuntu, which also includes things like Mint. They use the Debian package manager. You're probably familiar with APT. You've probably heard this, Advanced Package Tool. The low-level package manager in Debian is dpackage, and then it's run by the Advanced Package Tool, or APT. There's also an aptitude package manager, which is APT with a incursive front end. It sort of has one of those DOS screen things to help you search and find software. It's sort of a user interface. It's got menus, it's got search commands and things like that. So that's the Debian tree, which again, like I say, includes Ubuntu and things like Linux Mint. Then there's the Arch terminal or Arch tree. Arch is it's not the oldest package line, or it's not the oldest Linux line, but it's one of the major ones today, and they use something called Pacman. I've not included, what's the other one called? Not Pacman, but Packstrap, because that's for actually installing a new system. Then I've also listed a few others here, including Yay, Pick AUR, and AUR Utils. These are, Yay is like a front end for Pacman, but it also accesses the Arch user repositories, so Arch has their main repository with all their software, and then they have user repositories, which are maintained by the users. And then these last three items in the Arch are used in to access packages in the user repositories. This is packages put together by users but hasn't been officially tested by Arch. And a lot of times, if you don't find a package in the Pacman repositories, you'll find it in the AUR. Fedora or Red Hat, RPM was the one back in the day. Then they had Yum, and then they had DNF. And there's a lot of distros in this tree as well. And they all use the same package managers. Gentoo, Portage, Emerge, their package managers. Again, another tree. This is one of the earlier ones also. Slackware uses Slack package, slap-get. Yeah, these are all command line package managers. None of them are hard. You just have to learn how to use them. Now, since we are living in the 2000s, 2025, KDE Plasma has introduced Discover, and whichever Debian, Arch, Fedora, whatever you have, when they have KDE Discover, it's hooked up to their, set up to work with their package repositories. GNOME also has GNOME software. Arch has something called Octopi. Mint has a software manager. These are all, well, for the most part, desktop-based, but they actually access the package for the distro they're installed from, and they do it in a graphical kind of way. They're like the Apple Store, the Microsoft Store, the Google Play Store, that kind of thing. And we're going to take a look at the ones for KDE and Mint. I mentioned Synaptic earlier. I think that was that predates all of them. That was an extension of like Aptitude. It looks similar, but it's actually using a graphical display instead of a text display. So it's out there too. But those are the graphical package managers, which if you're a new user, you're probably going to gravitate towards. And the last thing I want to talk about before we get to some visuals is different systems of package managers. These are containers. They're used to install applications. The common ones are Flatpak, Snap, AppImage. What they've done here is they've taken a container and put the package in the container. They've also included a lot of the dependencies in the container. So in theory, any of these can run on any Linux system because they have all the really unique dependencies built into them already, and they just run on top of a standard Linux kernel and the GNU utilities, things like that. So again, these are containerized and they're sandboxed, and they contain the dependencies as well as the actual app. The problem with these is they can be larger than standard applications, and you might have multiple of the same dependency installed across multiple Flatpaks or Snaps or whatever. And because there's another layer there, you're also going to have slower response times. How measurable they are is going to depend on how powerful your software is. Or how measurable they are is going to depend on how powerful your hardware is, actually. Now, you should not confuse these with Docker, Podman, or LXC. These are container sandbox technologies also, but they're generally not used for application distribution or like system level stuff. Like if you wanted to run a web server, you'd do it in one of these type of containers rather than a Flatpak, Snap, or AppImage. But don't get confused by Docker, Podman, or LXC. They're normally not used as a package distribution method. Flatpak, Snap, and AppImage are. And like, for example, Flatpak has the FlatHub as a central repository, but it's open source, so there are other repositories you could use. Snap on the Ubuntu side is, well, it's somewhat closed source on the server side. There's only one Snap store and Ubuntu runs it. There's only one Snap store and Ubuntu runs it, and nobody else. Like I say, Flatpak's totally open source, and there's multiple places to get Flatpaks from. Same with AppImages. Okay, let's take a look at my KDE desktop here. We're going to go ahead and open the Discover store since that's the KDE one, so we can see what that's like. And you'll notice on the left here, we've got a place for updates. And we can see we've got some updates. It's not going to force you to install them. You can install them when you want or not at all. You can uncheck them and never install them. Under settings, You can see the various repositories we're using here. The vendor software repositories, the Fedora repositories, the FlatHub repositories. And you can then go ahead and search for the most popular software, or you can look specifically for types of software. You can even search for a specific piece of software. For example, let's search for Krita, which is a graphical program. So we'll type that in a search. There's Krita. There's an actual install arrow on the right pointing down, but we'll go ahead and click on the package. And from here, we can see that it's available as a regular package, and we can see it's also available from FlatHub. We're just going to go ahead and install the regular package here. Just click on it, and we wait for the install to finish, and it's done. That was all there was to installing software on Linux. We can go to our, add it to our favorites here, and launch it. And that was it. Like I say, very easy to install applications on Linux using the graphical interfaces. And this was the KDE store. Okay, just for fun, let's jump over to our Linux Mint install. And remember I said this is called Software Manager under Linux Mint. Let's go ahead and open it. It's basically the same sort of thing, a little different layout here. You got your options, you've got your various repositories, you got your popular apps, you can search for apps. We'll find the same app here, Krita. And you can see it's also system package or a FlatHub package. We'll go ahead and install that. And on our Mint install here, this one requires a password before it'll do the install. So some might call that a little secure, some might call that excessive. It's up to you. And we'll wait for it to install. Then we go ahead and open it. And there we've installed Krita on a different one. Now we can also use, so Mint is a Ubuntu derivative, which is a Debian derivative. So we can open the terminal and let's look at apt, and you can see some of the commands here for it. We're going to use one of them, I think, list. Yeah, apt list. This is all the packages in the repository. Let's go ahead and filter that through grep and Krita, and we can see we've downloaded, there's couple of different Krita packages, but we can see which ones are actually installed. And we can do several searches with this. Now, one thing I will note on Mint, we have a separate software manager for updates, whereas updates were all within the KDE Discover store as well. This one uses a separate store for that. So again, I just threw that command line stuff in there, but main point here is you have a graphical interface that makes installing various software very simple. Okay, that's about it for this video. Like I said, basically I wanted to talk about the software stores. I wanted to go into a little explanation about dependencies, package managers, packages, repositories, things like that. And I wanted to list some of the ones you've probably heard about. So I'm hoping I covered all that, and you new users, you feel a little more comfortable with the whole software concept and installing it on Linux. It's different than on Windows. I mean, some software you go down the same road like you would on Windows. And if you're really hardcore, you can find the source code and compile it yourself, but I'm assuming you're not going to want to do that, especially if you're a new user. So the software stores, like I say, there's most of the major desktops, they have a software store of some sort. Like I say, KDE Discover, GNOME software, Software Manager in Mint. Look around when you load a desktop and see if you can find their software store, and it just makes managing what's installed and installing other stuff much easier. So yeah, if you got that out of this, then yeah, I met my goal. So software is easy on Linux to install. Anyway, if you like this video, if it was useful, please like, please share, please comment, give it a thumbs up, all that fun stuff. Like I said, this is probably the last video I'm going to be doing from Virginia. Anyways, a couple more weeks, we'll be on our way to the Philippines. I've got to start getting things packed up. And once I get to the Philippines, I can set up my server farm again. That's coming. So, yeah, we'll see you there.